everybody. Welcome to the Diaries Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Jordyn.
So, this is our first episode. So, we're going to introduce ourselves really quickly so you can get a better idea of who we are if you've never come across us before. And, Jordyn, you can go first.
Hi, my name is Jordyn. I'm 21 years old. I'm chronically ill and disabled. I do have a service dog. His name is Chowder. A lot of people follow me because of my service dog named Chowder. My diagnoses are POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, gastroparesis, MCAS, hypoglycemia, just a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of mental health disorders. There's a lot of diagnoses going on.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track. So, I'm Sarah. I'm 25. I have a multi-purpose service dog named Ollie, and all of my spoons go to him. I'm also disabled and chronically ill. Um, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility type like Jordyn. I have POTS. I also have gastroparesis, and I'm currently getting all my nutrition through a GJ tube, feeding tube. I have really just GI dysmotility in general. I also have migraines, MCAS, and then I have an autoimmune liver disease, just autoimmune hepatitis, and what we're calling autoimmune cholangiopathy or cholangitis, since we actually don't have a confirmed diagnosis of that. And I am currently in the first stages of liver failure. So we are starting the process of liver transplant. And I can explain more about that later down the line, but that is kind of what's going on right now. So, for our podcasts, we're going to be doing a segment before we get into our main topic, and it's just going to be basically how our week was, and like what we've experienced, and just talking overall life with a chronic illness. So, you can go first, Jordyn.
This week and like last week have just been like really hard for me regarding like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Been having a lot of problems with my knees and my hips popping out and dislocating. Um, right now, currently, I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. If you don't know what that is, it means I'm able to walk still. It's basically like part-time wheelchair use when as needed. Kind of is like the best way to explain it. The current wheelchair that I have is like labeled a cheap wheelchair from CVS because of how expensive custom ones could be cost. So I ended up having to have that conversation with my doctor that I think it was time. And he had been bringing it up for a while, and I was like, no, I'm fine because imposter syndrome, is just something I heavily struggle with. And it's been very hot recently where I live. And it's been causing my POTS to flare up severely, very a lot of dizziness, tachycardia. I've had a couple fainting spells. I do IV hydration through my central line twice a week. Well, not twice a week, 2 times a day, 1 liter. So I have a total of 8 hours a day hooked up, and it just feels like it's not even helping really anymore. And then just like gastroparesis, like I went out to dinner with my mom, I believe it was last night, and I was just eating sushi, and after like the second bite I just felt extreme nausea, and I knew I was gonna end up throwing up, and I threw up at a very fancy restaurant, and I was very embarrassed. It sucked.
I've been there before, so I know how frustrating, and I don't know, it just makes you feel awful, like getting sick, and think that I was able to make it to the bathroom, but it still makes you feel othered, and like it's embarrassing. I don't know. It's not fun at all. So
it is embarrassing.
yeah, I'm sorry that happened.
It's okay.
So do you want me to go and talk about my week? Are you good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had a lot going on the past couple weeks with my liver disease. It's complicated to explain, so I'll do the best I can. And I don't think um, autoimmune hepatitis is very well known, so I'll do the best I can to explain it a little bit. But basically, I have an autoimmune liver disease that I was born with. I did not do anything to cause it. And part of what's happening right now is I have like a complication or just something that can happen, which is called esophageal varices. So they're basically like the veins that are in your esophagus because the blood isn't moving through my liver properly. It goes to the next best area or vein they can find. So it tries to go through the ones in my esophagus. And because of this excess blood, of like traffic, you can kind of think of it as like traffic on highways. Um, they're ballooning up and getting larger than they should be, and it's a very dangerous situation. And we found them when I was getting my feeding tube replaced about a month ago, and um, we did not expect this to happen as soon as it is. But I have four of them, and I got two of them banded. Um, it sounds like it's just like a rubber band, basically keeping them from getting any larger and bursting. Because if that happens, you internally bleed out basically, and you won't even know that it happens. And you just pass away, and that's terrifying. And it's definitely something that can happen. So we're doing our best to keep all of that, but the banding was an awful experience. There were a lot of things that should not have happened that did take place. Um, and it's a very painful procedure to have done. I'm still having issues just even talking, breathing, swallowing. It is painful and not super fun. But I'm getting on I don't know, getting a little bit better. And then I've been having had a migraine a couple nights ago, which is just, I think you had a migraine at the same time, Jordyn.
I did, yes.
Yeah,
I saw your text to be like, I have a migraine if I don't respond, and I just looked at it and I turned my phone back
yeah.
over. I was like, I have a migraine too, and I'm not gonna even respond.
No, I'm like, when I feel one coming on, I'm like, I text my mom, text everyone. I'm like, see you on the other side. And then I take my rescue medication and hope that I don't end up in the hospital, because migraines are debilitating. In my case, I don't know. Some people like are able to continue on with life. I don't know how, but like they can go to work, and I don't understand how people can do that. But um,
Migraine, migraines are
go ahead.
definitely like to different people and different experiences. Like they affect
Yeah.
everyone differently. For me, it's just like extreme frontal pain and behind my eyes, and I
Mm,
like it's just very, very overwhelming. And I just have to lay there and I put like ice packs on my head and
yep.
take rescue medication until I'm able to just basically let it blow over. I don't have like extreme migraines where they'll last like days and days and days. Mine will just
Mm,
like a couple hours and then they'll blow over, but they're still like really intense for me and they make me like hot and clammy and sweaty and really irritable.
yeah. They're not fun for sure. Um, and then I so continuing with my week. Today, well, how long ago was that? Like 4 or 5 days ago, I got an MRI and an MRCP, which is just like a specialized MRI that was looking at my liver and my bile ducts. And it was just a repeat one. We weren't expecting to see anything. Um, and I got a call just a couple hours ago that there is a stone in my common bile duct, which is beyond frustrating because I've had this before, and it's a very long story, but I had this before, and I had pancreatitis about like 14 times in 2016. It was like over a 6 month period. They couldn't figure out what was wrong, until I begged them to do an ERCP, which is like a procedure where they go into your bile ducts and are able to like clean them out or push anything along or add a stent. So I knew that this is probably what is causing like my bilirubin to be so elevated. Like I don't know if you can see. I know you have noticed, Jordyn. Like I'm very jaundiced and my eyes are yellow. That is because of this, and now we know why. We're trying to get me worked into the schedule so I can get an ERCP and get everything on the up and up, and hopefully I can recover from it. But it's not going to be a fun thing, and it's super painful. So I am not looking forward to that, but that is what's been going on. I know it's a little bit longer, but I have to kind of explain a little bit more. And I know with you, Jordyn, like how has your POTS been? Like with the heat, does it make it worse for you? Because it definitely does for me.
Yes, it definitely does make just like basically everything worse for me. Personally, a lot of people have always been like, "Oh, when it's cold, like my body aches," but like
Mm.
that is true when it comes to like EDS for me. But then when
Mm-hmm.
it's hot, it's like a whole another level for me because my POTS will aggravate every other symptom that I have and all my other conditions. At least that's how it feels like for me
Yeah.
with POTS, just being super dizzy and nauseous. And then nauseous can trigger like my gastroparesis nausea. It can cause me to vomit, and it's like not fun at all. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like a chain reaction almost. And then with just being super fatigued and exhausted just from living with POTS and blood pooling and just physical body aches, it just feels like it amps up my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and just makes my body ache worse than it already does constantly. I probably live about like a level 6 pain almost every day, and it sucks. So like when you can't control, heat because of like where you live, it sucks, and then you're stuck inside and you have to run the AC, and then having to run the AC gets very, very expensive. So it's just like some of the battles just with chronic illness suck, and a lot of people don't think about certain things like that. It's always just get over it, you're just hot. But I think fainting is probably the worst symptom that I have when it comes to POTS, or just out of
Mm.
everything. Dislocations and fainting for me is just like, and then when I get hot, like really, really hot, is when I ended up I faint a lot.
And that makes me so worried for you. Thankfully, I don't pass out very often. But man,
That's why we have
that's
chowder.
scary. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm
those
glad that
those
he's there.
Those fainting alerts. Sorry, I'm like putting lotion on my tattoo because it's so dry. And then,
Yeah.
with EDS not being able to heal properly, you really got
Hmm.
to make sure that it's all good.
Well, at least you're not allergic, like having an allergic reaction to the ink. That would have been fun.
Yeah,
Your
we're
whole arm
hopefully
glued
not.
up.
I would cry because MCAS also sucks. Did a face
It does.
mask the other day, like just like so I vlog on. I have two different types of channels. I run a Getting Pig channel, Chronically Piggies. It'll be linked down below if you're interested. And then I do a chronic illness YouTube as well. And I was filming like a nighttime routine with me and five guinea pigs, and I decided to try this new face mask that I got from Ipsy, and it made my face so red, and it like swelled up over time, like after like I had took it off. Like normally like you get like a little red and it's like a little irritated, but it got huge and lumpy, and I got like a really bad reaction, and I was upset. I was triggered.
I've had similar things, but it's like I'll react to something that I've been using for months and it makes zero sense. You're like, but I wasn't allergic to this 2 days ago, but all of a sudden I am now. Contact dermatitis or whatever it's called. I don't even know anymore.
Yes.
But I did want to mention that Jordyn and I do run. I mean, she's the main person that does this, but a Facebook group for service dog support. So like many, yes, for the dogs, but also for the handlers that
It's mainly
for these
support
service
for the
dogs.
handlers.
Can you? It's like, yes, we are supporting the dogs. And then you also started another one. Do you want to talk about the new one that we started?
So I definitely do. Well, me and Sarah have started the Service Dog page almost a year ago now. We advertised it a lot like in the beginning, and then just
Mm,
kind of like life got in the way, like heavily, at least on my end. A lot of stuff had
yeah,
happened late last year,
yeah.
and I kind of just like forgot the page had existed. And then some drama had happened in the page, and it definitely reeled me back in and all of the admins back in because like we would like monitor it, approve people, check
Hmm.
the page, but we weren't like heavily into like the chats and situations like that. So um we had to deal with that. And then as I was reading through the chats, because you're able to have different types of chats within the group, I started to notice that a lot of people were talking about illnesses and what they were suffering with. And I also
Hmm.
didn't just like our chat, was strictly for service dogs and like service dog handlers and what they're going through. Yes, but I also wanted to make it a safe space for other people. I wanted to make a new Facebook group so other people could feel safe in an environment talking about chronic illness or any form of disabilities that they experience. Through day-to-day life that isn't surrounding service dogs. So it's just kind of two separate Facebook groups, but they are ran by all the same people. Um, and it's basically just a chronic illness support group, and it's still very small, and it's definitely a little bit more taboo, especially with all of the sick Olympic stuff right now happening within the
Hmm.
chronic illness community. And that is something that is definitely stressful to think about when you're running these types of groups, that some people can just be in these groups to get sicker. And a lot of,
Yeah.
and that's just like there's a mental health disorder called Munchausen's disease.
Hmm.
Typically, it's Munchausen's by proxy where people make other people sick,
Hmm.
but sometimes people will do it to themselves. And, you just have to like really be careful because you need to monitor that environment. So right now it's still a little bit small, but if you are
Yeah.
interested in joining it, we can approve you. Everyone's trusted until proven you're not trustworthy.
Yeah.
Um, but both Facebook groups and all of our social medias will be linked down below.
Yeah. And I think it is a really good place if anyone is looking for like I guess non-toxic environment where you can be open about what you're going through because it can be really toxic, both in the service dog community, it's pretty bad, but definitely in the spoony or chronic illness or disabled, whatever you want to use, community, it is like the sick Olympics. It's like you'll see it all the time where it's like my heart rate was 140. My POTS is so bad. And then you'll see, well, mine was 160. And then, but yesterday mine was 180. And it's like this constant,
But mine was 180 and I passed out and I hit my head and I dislocated my hip. Like, baby,
mm,
it's not that big of a deal. If you're struggling, you're struggling. Everyone else's bodies like react to different heart rates at different things, different blood pressures at different things. Like if you feel like 140 is really high for you, then 140 is really high
yeah,
for you.
yeah. And
Like
I think,
no one. And we try really, really hard to keep, especially within the service dog community, sick Olympics does happen a lot more, I feel like,
mhm,
than in the chronic illness community because everyone needs to prove that they need a service dog, and that's like a really terrible topic and within itself because of how many
right.
people will fake having service dogs because service dog is a trend. People,
Yep,
as sad as that might sound, it is a trend, especially
it's
with
true.
younger people between the age of like 13 and 16. A lot of people will fake having a service dog because they want the attention, and that's honestly a really sad
Hmm.
subject within itself. but within the chronic illness community, it's just we work so hard, at least in our groups, to make sure that, there's no drama, like, and within our questions, like, no harassment, no bullying, no sick Olympics, none of that crap. And if you get one warning, and if you don't listen, then you're out essentially. Like, we don't give people second chances because of how toxic and taboo our communities can get.
Yeah. And I really do hope that I don't know, like my hope for this podcast was that we could also build a little community that is also open to supporting each other, and we can get that toxicity out. Um, and I hope that it also gives some people some sort of like understanding of themselves a little bit deeper, and it also helps with like imposter syndrome, because like you mentioned it, but it's something I really struggle with as well, and I've been quote unquote sick for I don't know, over a decade now, 10 years, and I still deal with it on a daily basis. Even with Ollie, I'm like, am I sick enough? Does he need to come with me? Be does he need to do this, and does he need to know this thing, does this task, and blah blah blah. And it's like, yes, I tell myself, yes, Sarah, you are sick enough for this. You don't have to prove your sickness to other people. And that is what, I don't know, Jordyn and
I
I have.
think that if I think that if people have to prove that you're sick enough to need a service dog,
Right.
those are generally the people that don't need a service dog. And I say that
Yeah.
lightly, and it's just like if you're constantly having to prove and prove and prove and prove, and it's not even because you get hate on social, like there's always going to be people that hate and they're like, oh, you're faking it, but it's the people that will excessively try to prove themselves are generally the people that probably don't really need one.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And
And I,
service
I think,
dogs are medical equipment. Like, you guys need to remember
yeah.
that for anyone listening to the podcast. Like, they are
Hmm.
medical devices, they are medical equipment, whether it's psychiatric, mobility, medical
Hmm.
alert, multi-purpose, whatever, they are medical devices. They're not just something you can slap a harness on and take to the grocery store. Like, it's a very daunting process, and tasks take a long time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think we should do a whole episode in the future on
Prob
service dogs and our experience, and talk about this a little bit more, because I think it's important. But not everyone listening to this is going to have a service dog, but I think that you can understand, even if you don't, if you're not a handler, like you can kind of agree that it's that same type of thing in the chronic illness community. So yeah, I mean, I I don't know, Jordyn, like we've we met online, right?
we did.
And I don't know, maybe you guys should probably know. We have never met in person. We met online a year ago. We don't have to go into detail about all the drama that happened of how I found you, but I did DM you, and I am so thankful that I did, because we've been friends for a year now, and
That is true. Hopefully
it
we'll
is,
meet soon.
yes, but it has like literally changed my life, and I'm very thankful for you. And I
Thank
think
you.
having that person like that understands you means a lot, and it's really important to me. So I hope that this podcast can help other people feel that same way, because I don't have a lot of support outside of this, and I know you have a hard time with that too, just getting that support that you need.
A
So
lot of
I
family
just
and
hope that this
friends don't
helps.
understand.
Yeah,
They
it's
really don't, it's just overwhelming when, like, especially when your friends stop inviting you to stuff, or your family's like, they stop inviting you to stuff, or it's like she's not going to go anyways because she's too sick. It's
mm,
just it gets sad and overwhelming, or it's just like friends don't understand what chronic means, like lifetime, long term, like it's chronic. Like It's just frustrating when people are like, "Oh, it's gonna go away. It's gonna go away. Get better soon." It's like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that. But I think
Yeah.
that we wanted to talk about something else today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's okay that we go on a little bit about this because I think it's important for our first episode for whoever is listening to get to know me and you separately and kind of like, I don't know, interact a little bit because this is what a lot of the podcasts in the future are going to be like. But today, I'm basically going to be interviewing Jordyn, and I want to hear your entire, I don't know, like spoony chronic illness. I don't know your journey to where you are now and your chronic illness. So, um, yeah, let's move on to that then. Good. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into our topic for this podcast. So we're going to be doing our individual journeys. Um, First, we're going to do Jordyn's, and then the next one will be my episode. Will be reversing roles. So let's start off um, with your story and like what was the first thing that really happened for you that like made it. I mean, your story is very, I don't know, the word is like unique, I guess. It's very different from mine. I
Yes,
got sick younger, but for you, it was like pretty unique. So, how did that happen for you?
so growing up, there were definitely some signs that I had EDS or hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is definitely like looking back. I mean, I had no idea what that condition is. Like, I barely understand it now, and it's been almost 4 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, like looking back, there were definitely some signs of like gastro issues. And then there were definitely some like signs of EDS and like autonomic nervous system disorders like
Mm-hmm.
dysautonomia growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of just like didn't really, just kind of thought it was normal, like I didn't know any better. I just knew my body, I knew myself. Like I just thought kind of like, it was whatever. Around the age of 17, I got pregnant, which, yes, it was very young, but I got pregnant. And that's just kind of where my story starts is I got pregnant. I around 20 weeks started to get pretty just like tired and fatigued and started getting a lot of blood pooling and started to feel strange. The OBGYN kind of just said, like this is normal, this is how normal pregnancy is. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're a first time mom. And I definitely would say that was one of like my first experiences with medical gaslighting. I did have a male OBGYN and they say that males are better than females, but I've never personally had a female, so I could not speak from experience. But um, around 28 weeks is when I started to get like sick, and um, I just started not to feel good, and I was constantly like in and out of the labor and delivery ER. There are two separate types of ERs. If you don't know, you get taken out to labor and delivery, and you get triaged up there. They're totally two separate things. So I was in and out until about 30 weeks when they told me that I had basically borderline preeclampsia, but I didn't have it yet. Which, if you don't know, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome can cause preeclampsia.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of where it all started. And then around 30 weeks, I got told to be on some serious bed rest, and they did not explain the severity to me of preeclampsia. I did not truly know. So I quit my job and I kind of just hung around the house all day, but I wasn't bed resting like obviously I very much needed to. And then I got hospitalized at pretty much between 30, 32 weeks ish, somewhere in there. And then I was hospitalized for 2 weeks and delivered at 34 weeks exactly. Um, that's like, it was just a whole thing. And I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. I didn't develop eclampsia, which is seizures. So it was
Mm,
before that, but my blood pressure was like 215 over 150, very high, very scary. Put on a magnesium drip. I had to get shots in my bottom to help, make my son's lungs develop. My son was born 6 weeks prematurely. He was in the NICU for 7 days. He was a very small baby. He weighed 5 pounds, very, very, very small.
yeah.
And then about 4 months after that, it was kind of just like they told me that I had late onset preeclampsia. So I was still like, I wasn't pregnant anymore, but I was still
Mm.
struggling with the side effects that lingering preeclampsia can cause,
And
which
there's
now
no
we
like,
know.
sorry, is there a cure for preeclampsia, or is it just like the cure is to have the baby? Is like there a
The cure is
treatment
to
for it?
have the baby. Yes.
So the continuing on, that's wild. They probably told you, oh, it'll get better once you have the baby, and then you had your son, and you were still experiencing symptoms. Like the was it the same symptoms that you experienced before? Was it worse, better? Like what were you
And
experiencing after you had him?
I had to, like I said, I was in the ER a lot. There was one ambulance ride. It always felt like the same exact way as like a preeclampsia episode had felt after I had given birth. I did have a natural delivery. Yes, I had an epidural. I just did not end up having an emergency C-section. I almost did though. If you guys
Mm,
want like how my actual labor and delivery story went because of preeclampsia, we could probably do something about that for you guys.
yeah.
Um, but after 4 months, I was still like really battling with it and severe high blood pressure. My husband would have to leave for work. I obviously had a new born baby that was 4 months old. The whole situation was just very scary and terrifying. And at that point, I had went back to work due to, I needing to go back to work. Um, and I had worked for about 3 months during that period, and I kind of just was not okay, honestly. Like the preeclampsia symptoms had just gotten worse. So I ended up getting temporarily put on disability. And there's two different times. There's EDD and then there's SSI. They're very two different separate things. Um, and that was just frustrating because it was like I really enjoy working. I've been working since I was 16 years old. I've
Mm,
always had a really strong work ethic. So it was just frustrating for me. And it was just like, exhausting overall, especially physically and mentally. And I ended up having a really bad episode at work, and then that was caused, and I had to leave and go to the emergency room. My blood pressure was so high and my pulse was so high. Around that time, there was talk of service dogs, and the word being disabled was being thrown around very
mm,
loosely. So we kind of just thought, maybe if we got a service dog and we can train it to either, do medical response tasks or medical, alert and response, that could potentially
mhm.
improve my quality of life. So now that's initially how we got Chowder to begin with. And then I found through the service dog community itself, I found out about a condition called POTS, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And I had to fight very long to get that diagnosis. That was my first one, and
Mm.
I was diagnosed through a stress test that I fainted on, and which led to a tilt table test. Yes, I fainted on the treadmill while
Oh
walking.
my gosh.
So I ended up fainting on my stress test while I was on the treadmill, and that was kind of alert. I went through five cardiologists at that point trying to get someone to believe me, but everyone was like,
Wow.
"It's anxiety, it's in your head."
Hmm.
There was a lot of medical gaslighting when it came to the initial me advocating for myself. I got accused of doctor shopping, which
Mm.
sucked. I was young, I was 18.
Yeah.
Um, so it was just frustrating, and women statistically have a harder and longer time getting diagnosed with POTS than men do, which
Yeah.
also sucks. So I ended up having my tilt table test and I did pass out, and that's how I ended up getting diagnosed with POTS.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first diagnosis.
Wow. So it was just like you have a baby and now you have a diagnosis, a new diagnosis. What was that like for you? Because you were a new mom and you have a son to take care of. So like, can you share a little bit of like maybe, I mean, it's hard to talk about, but like the frustrating part or like what was that experience for you?
I think emotionally, how it felt was I felt like a failure as a mother. And if anyone is listening to this and you're chronically ill and you have a child, you definitely can understand the emotional toll that it takes. It's like, mom's not feeling good right now. I can't get up and I can't come play with you, especially when
Yeah.
your child is so young and they heavily rely on you, just for.
Okay, so if we look different and sound different, that's because life happens. Jordyn is a mom, and there was an interruption, so we're having to film this a few days later, actually more than a few days later, because I had to get a procedure done. So we were talking about your diagnosis with POTS. So what came after you were diagnosed with POTS?
After I got diagnosed with POTS, it was just kind of like a shell shock because I had been fighting so long. And people say, like, it's not fighting to get a diagnosis. No, it is.
It is.
It straight is. It's
Yes.
fighting to get a diagnosis and fighting to get a doctor to listen to you. And that's the most frustrating part. So after fighting for so long, trying to, be heard and just listened to by a doctor, and then fainting on both tests, just kind of was like shell shock that this was real. And that just like really sucked, especially because I had explained in the previous that, like my husband was having to come home all the time to take care of me. And now it was just like, oh no, like this is real. And it was just really overwhelming to deal with, especially now that like I had known, it was POTS. It kind of just like limited me even more because I knew that I had to take it easy. And my son at that time was still like very young. He was like just about 2 years old, if not maybe like 2.5 at that point. No, he was a year and a half, just about to turn two.
Okay.
And it was sad because I just felt like I was missing the best years of his life, like so early
Mm.
on being a first time mom, like just being sick. And that was just so frustrating for me as like a person. And it was just overwhelming. And then all of a sudden, like medications and appointments and a neurologist. And then all of a sudden being sent down to Stanford. And then Stanford was just a whole nother situation in itself.
Gosh, you can go into that if you want to talk about it a little bit, because I know you're
Stanford's
more than POTS. Like, you know what I mean? You have other diagnoses, but I know POTS was like your first diagnosis.
it was, and it
Yeah.
sucked. And then basically going to Stanford, I was seeing a neurologist, and I'm not even sure if he had the qualifications to diagnose me with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it was later on confirmed through many of other doctors like agreeing with the
Hmm.
diagnosis. But I went to see him for POTS initially. They were just like, hey, we can't handle your type of treatment. Like, we don't know anything about this, like, local to where I live, which infuriated me.
Hmm.
So I had to travel down to Stanford, and I'm just like the hospital. It was like basically like a hospital room. It was so dark and so eerie, and there was just a bed and a computer and one chair. Like it was scary to like be in that room. And then he came in and he starts asking me questions about having POTS, and I was like, yada yada yada. And then he had me do a tilt table on the spot. I was fine with that. That wasn't even that big of a deal. I did not end up fainting on that one, but I almost did. I was just like, I think I'm about to pass out. And then he laid down the table. So I
Hmm.
didn't get to faint on that one because I did tell them on the initial tilt table that I think I was going to faint. And then they wanted to catch the recording of the fainting
Hmm.
episodes. But since they already had that documented, he didn't think it was necessary. And then he kind of just starts asking me like other questions, like, how's your GI tract? How do you sleep? How do your scars look? Like, does it hurt to walk? Like, random questions. And at this time I knew one person that had EDS, and I kind of just thought, like, naive of me, that it was like stupid and it wasn't real, and I was still like that sounds so bad from what I know now. And he just, you know, so I kind of just like, I knew what it was to like a point, but he didn't even bring it up. I think it's called the Baton scale. Is that what it
Yeah.
is? So then all of a sudden he's like, get on the table. And I was like, okay. And then he starts asking me to, like, have my hands to the ground and stand straight. And like, he's asking to see if I have atrophic scarring. I think it's what it's called. He's asking to see so many things. He has to see my stretch marks from when I had a baby. He just starts asking me like these random questions. And he was like, and he had like a really thick, heavy accent, and unfortunately, I don't do well with accents. So he kind of he did end up saying, because everything was documented in his notes, like he did have a scribe that was like documenting, and he's just like, yeah, so you have EDS, and that was it. That was just how I got diagnosed with EDS within like 4 weeks of each other. Yeah, because I got diagnosed with POTS officially at the end of December, and then January 24th, 2022 is when I got diagnosed with EDS. And that was just like, whoa. And during that time, before I had started using a cane and a wheelchair, because like I've always had problems with like my joints, but I honestly just thought it was because I was weak and like I didn't take care of my body and I ate like crap and like, I don't know. And then he didn't even like, like I said, like I was naive. I kind of thought POTS and EDS was kind of like a gimmick. Like I didn't really like know, like obviously I was like fighting for POTS, but I really just wanted a diagnosis at that point for fighting for so hard. And I knew it was, but then just like not even thinking that I had EDS, and then all of a sudden being diagnosed with EDS was like insane. Like I had never even thought that was an option for me, but I had started using a cane and a wheelchair about a month prior to that because of the fainting and how like bad my hips were hurting. Like, so I guess it just like kind of made sense. And I like always had like EDS pain like growing up. And then a couple months later is like when I started like experiencing my first like I only like dislocate and sublocate in my right shoulder, which I think is really weird. I don't like have necessarily problems with my left. I mean, it hurts, but like I don't dislocate. And then both of my hips do. So right around the time they were starting to sublocate. And I didn't know what that really meant. I was just like, gosh, these hurt. They feel like they're like out of place, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's so interesting to me because it's like, I don't know, I had issues with my joints growing up. And then when I started getting sick, I kind of thought what you thought before I knew what EDS was, that it was just like, oh, normal growing pains. I thought that it
Or
was
that.
from cheer. I did cheer in high school only for like, I think a total of 2 years. And I thought that like all of my joint pains were from that until I knew what EDS was, and later down the line I got diagnosed. But getting diagnosed with EDS anyway, without looking to get diagnosed or even really knowing much about it is wild to me because it took me years to get my diagnosis with EDS. Years
When
of
I
asking
tell
doctors.
people that I got
Yeah.
diagnosed with EDS that easy, people look at me like, are you kidding? It took me 5 years. How? And I was just, I don't even know how to answer that. Like,
No.
he just decided because I had POTS, and that based off the questions that he was asking me prior about GI issues and body pain and other family line history, he was like, get up, we're doing the Baton scale. And
Yeah.
they didn't even tell me at the appointment. I had to go, which was so weird. And I don't know if he did or he didn't, but like, 'cause the accent thing, but he had put in the notes, because Stanford's has like a patient portal that you're able to go
Yeah.
through and check your notes afterwards. And um, so I'm like looking, to see what my treatment plan was, because I needed to forward it to my primary, because for some reason he wouldn't. I don't know. So I literally just look in there and it says you were diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Sorry for my dog.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I just remember, like, me and my mom were at a restaurant, like, right after the appointment, and I just remember seeing that, and my face, like, went white, and my mom was like, "What?" And I was like, "This isn't real." And I look it up, and I think the most shell-shocking thing was, I guess, that most people with EDS don't live past the age of 50. And that freaked me out, which I don't even know if that's true. That's Google statistics. But that was like my first memory of being diagnosed with EDS, was seeing that you don't live past the age of 50 according to Google, and that freaked me out. I mean, I'm about to be 22,
Yeah.
It's like I've already lived half my life.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I wish that doctor that diagnosed you with EDS would have really talked to you in depth about it, because I know from what we've talked about before, just like as friends, that you thought this was like a death sentence. And
Yeah,
because he didn't do the due
because of the
diligence,
Google.
yeah, like you just don't want to Google things. Like sometimes it's just not worth it, but he didn't do his job at being your doctor and giving you the in-depth, like, I guess, outlook of what your future is going to look like. And I don't think that you would have heard, "Oh, you're not going to live past 50." I don't think you would have heard that. It's just scary. I can't imagine like what that felt like. It's probably similar to like what I've looked up and just Googling stuff, like, "Oh, this is not good," like liver transplant stuff. So I can relate to the shock of that. But like,
The wow
especially
factor.
with not being, like, not knowing you had this until a year before, not really being sick and like chronically ill like before, and then all of a
All
sudden
because I
it's
had a
from that.
baby.
Yeah, and now you have this genetic connective tissue disease that is now the obviously the root cause, but has caused all these other comorbidities for you. So what happened after that? Because I know we also struggle with mast cell, and that is something that is new for you. That I was like, "Jordyn, you should look into mast cell," and you were like, "No, I'm fine." And then like a week
No,
later,
I'm
you're like, "I
okay.
have an allergic reaction to this thing," and I'm like, I told you."
Stop calling me out.
After that, like, what happened? Because
You're like never gonna believe what happened next. Like,
what
I don't
happened
even think
next?
I don't think I ever actually talked about it with anyone. So I got diagnosed in January with, POTS and EDS very quickly. And then, around that time I started experiencing like some GI issues, but, I was kind of just like not taking care of myself, kind of just thought, bloat was normal, whatever.
Mm,
So like I was like slowly getting sicker. And that just kind of like was awful. And I had a really crappy primary at the time. She was a nurse practitioner that was 7 months pregnant. So I had an appointment scheduled with her in March, and day of the appointment, she calls and cancels it. Gets put on maternity leave. At that point, there wasn't an opening until mid-July. So for 7 months, I was unseen by someone that could refer me to other specialists. No
mm,
cardiologist, no neurologist, no anything was willing to, I'm not saying they can't, just they weren't willing to, they
mm,
wanted me to see a primary first after the
mm,
diagnosis is, before any care.
mm,
And then I had called my health center and I was like, damn it, listen. It's July. I've been waiting so long. I need to be in the next spot. I just got diagnosed with chronic illnesses at this point. I'm self medicating. What is that stuff called? liquid IV, that stuff ain't
Mm-hmm.
working anymore. A wheelchair
No.
ain't working anymore. Like, nothing's working. I can't do this by myself. My service dog is barely taking care of me as it is. Like, Chowder
Yeah.
was working around the clock, helping me walk
Yeah.
around the house, helping me literally all day, every day. I was extremely dependent on him at that point, as
Yeah.
he's being very noisy.
It's okay.
So I basically cried. I was on hold for about 45 minutes after I had pled my case to this operator.
Yeah.
And she told me that she was able to put me in with a doctor that was male.
Mm.
And I am not comfortable being seen by a male, but I was like, I don't even care. And I asked questions about him. He specializes in transgender youth. He specializes in
Mm.
women's health care. He
Mm.
specializes in a lot of things pertaining to women and LGBTQ plus community.
That's
So I kind of
awesome.
was just like, I will. And I looked him up on Google, of course, and he had
Always.
he had great reviews, honestly, for a
That's good.
doctor.
Yeah.
So I took the next available appointment, and at this time, Sarah, Wagon Pet Gear, all that had passed, Barking Bio Gear had passed. We had just now became friends. I don't even remember what the first, like the MCAS stuff happened, but I
Mm-hmm.
remember talking about that. I just don't remember the timeline of that. Um, and so I saw him early, like mid-July, like right before my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
My birthday is July 24th, so like around that time. And I was trying to get IV fluids through a cardiologist. I was scheduling appointments with specialists, trying to just see if anyone could help me, and no one was willing. No one would help me at all. Like, me and Sarah even made, I think you like had sent me like PowerPoints, and you
Yep.
had sent me, I don't even know how many things, and doctors were just like, drink water, eat salt, blah, blah, blah. But at this time, my GI issues were slowly starting to
Right.
get heavier and heavier, and I was
Yeah.
losing weight, and it just, everything sucked. So I see him and I walk in and I'm so nervous to like meet him because, like they didn't have a photo of him online. So I didn't know how old
Mm.
he was. They wouldn't disclose that to me over the phone, whatever. So I was really hoping that I wasn't going to get like a 50-year-old chump that's like, you're a good girl,
Mm.
get out.
Yeah.
Which that's normal for
Yep.
doctors. And if there's any doctors listening, do better.
Please. Thank you.
Please do better,
Yeah.
please. So you don't have a 19, just 20-year-old girl that just trying to like live her life,
Yeah.
and with a baby and that can't. So I tell him, I'm like, at this point, I want IV. I even said straightforward, I was like, I haven't seen a primary in 7 months, and I'm going to probably sound a little demanding, and I'm going to probably sound rude, but I haven't had healthcare in a long time. And he says, okay, let's hear it. Like, what? Like, that was so shocking for me to hear after being, no, 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 you're fine, stop, quit, you're whining, a million things. So I'm like, I want to do IV hydration. I want physical therapy. I want pelvic floor therapy. I want a gastric emptying study. I was basically being like, this, and this. And then he was like, okay, we'll do all of it.
Mm.
And he had to see the Stanford notes and the cardiology
Right.
notes before he would approve all of that. But I had all of it on my phone. I literally brought like a file with me.
Yeah.
And I had Chowder at the time, and I needed an updated service dog letter, gave it to me on the spot, ordered the IV hydration orders, and then we did a couple ketamine infusions for like depression and pain.
Mm.
Ketamine feels like crap.
Mm.
If you're looking into that, you will feel kind of drugged, and it sucks. And I
Mm.
don't really think long term that it helps with chronic pain or depression
Mm.
whatsoever.
Yeah, it's definitely something
Sorry.
to look into, but I mean, everyone's different, but if that's your experience, it's your experience, and it's not an option for you, and that's how it is. But
Yeah. So, I ended up doing IV hydration for 2 weeks, and that led into him. And Sarah and I had talked about this, like, a bunch, being like, get a port, don't do a PICC line, because PICC lines are dangerous. They can rip out easy, they can dislodge easily. And I, was just like, it's fine. I will, do whatever it takes. And the infusion center was basically pushing at the thought of getting a PICC line. They were just like, I think that you need to get a PICC line, and all of these things. And I was just kind of like, I guess, like, okay. And I consented for it, like it
Yeah.
was me saying, okay, I will do this. And then the PICC line experience within itself, yeah, it hurt, but it was fine. I had a PICC line. I'm looking at some photos right now. From July, it was the same PICC line. Didn't get it replaced. From July to September 27th. So no, August 8th is when I got it placed, and I had it until September 27th. And that experience leading into MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. I'm going to show a photo. I guess it's triggering. If you're just listening, you don't have to worry about it. But this is what the photo was. I had a massive mast cell activation syndrome reaction from adhesive.
Yeah.
And I had been telling my infusion center, because they would change my dressing, being like, this is starting to hurt, it's starting to itch, this is uncomfortable, like, please listen to me. And they're like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It ended up getting infected. I was like, you can just like see it was like blistering. It was not happy. It was bleeding all the time. It was pussing. Luckily, it was a topical skin infection, contact dermatitis, that just the skin got infected. It didn't get to like sepsis level. So we got it removed, and then I ended up getting a Grosjean catheter, because the reason that the PICC line got inserted was to do IV hydration at home and to increase IV hydration, because doing twice a week in an infusion center absolutely sucked. Like sitting twice a week in an infusion center for 2 hours, plus I had a kid, and being like gone that long, and trying to work with my husband's work schedule was just not practical anymore. So like the next photo, I guess I'll just show, like, I won't show like a triggering one, but I ended up getting a Hickman Grosjean catheter, and then this is what it looked like. I actually haven't seen any other chronic illness creator or anyone else have this type of line. Most of everyone has a pro line, which those are the little purple ones that everyone sees that are really, really short, and that they're kind of uncomfortable, and they're just strictly just on your chest. I had a really long, mine was from the chest insertion was down to my hip. I think it was a foot and a half. So we would have to wrap it up, and it was still like to my ribs.
I'm going to ask you Port versus Hickman and the
why
difference,
I don't
but
have
I don't
one?
even know the difference between them. And
I do.
Why? What? Tell me the things, or you can say move on, and we'll move on. That's fine. We can talk
The
about
difference between a Port and a Hickman is that a Port is, Sarah actually has a Port, but I do not. Ports are inserted catheters that are underneath the skin. They have the same purpose. They have different types. They have power ports. They have double lumen ports that are on the skin, so you have two different forms of access points. They're basically the same thing as a Hickman, but underneath your skin as an implant, instead of like the one I currently have, the Broviac, that's external. Yours is internal. So that's the difference.
So when I de-access, I get to shower.
You get to shower, swim, have fun. Whatever. I don't.
Except because I have a feeding tube, I can't do those things. Like, I can shower and take a bath, but I can't go into the pool, can't go into the ocean or hot tub or anything like that. So I guess, I mean, we're the same in the end, but I mean, it's different options for different people, and if that's what works for you, that's what works for you.
I can't shower adequately. I haven't had a correct shower in almost a year, which is absolutely crazy to think about. But just back to mast cell activation syndrome, before we actually had pulled the line itself, I was trying so many different types. I just wanted to like put this out here for anyone else struggling with adhesives. Try IV 3000. A lot of people, I'll show you guys just what it looks like in case anyone doesn't know. Like, you can get these like at a medical supply store normally. This is what it looks like. I would definitely try this out if you're having, even if you don't have mast cell, try it out.
Yeah,
Because
even if you just
it's
have sensitive skin,
try it.
sometimes
It's
it's
meant.
better to go with something like that. Yeah.
And then I'm also now allergic to bio patches, the little foam
Mm,
patches. I can't use any form of any form of patches on my line. It just has to be bare alcohol. That's it. Like I can't put anything, which sucks. Like mast cell sucks because
mm-hmm.
I'll have it on my skin maybe 20 minutes and all of a sudden I'm burning and itching and blistering and
It's awful.
it just sucks. So you're probably wondering, well, the line I have now is completely different. So basically, next is how I got diagnosed with gastroparesis, and that really sucked. If you follow me on YouTube, I have a whole video about my gastric emptying study, and if you want to see what happened, and definitely go watch that. I'm not going to go into that, but I ended up getting my scan done. I did a 5 hour scan. I think you did a 5 hour scan too, Sarah. Um, and it just sucked. Like, you can't throw up. You can't you can't, like, you can't, at least they wouldn't let me take nausea meds. They needed
Mm,
my stomach to be how it was,
mm,
exactly what the meal was, and then that was it. And I just remember being so sick and just like they let me just lie there the entire time on the bed. And I left a couple times, but they were just like, don't, just don't move, just lay there to like try to like power through it. And, I was telling, the lady that I had wasn't even really sure at the time like what gastroparesis was. I just kind of like had like an inkling because I was right about POTS, and I mean I wasn't really right about EDS, but just because like how I guess easy the diagnosis was, it was just like it's got to be gastroparesis. Like
well,
there's no
and
other
well,
like
sorry. Like, I mean, you see other people that have EDS that also have gastroparesis. So you are
and
probably like,
struggle with the
huh, I should
same
look into
exact
that.
symptoms. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, it's caused by EDS in my case. So it is very common to have EDS, POTS, gastroparesis, and sometimes mast cell activation syndrome. And they kind of all group together. And what I've seen, at least in the past few years, I've seen that they kind of all go hand in hand. And it's just because of how EDS is and how it affects pretty much every single organ in our bodies if you have actual EDS and not just a hypermobility disorder like that isn't genetic.
you just like you have to pass either the Baton scale or have to have the
Mm-hmm.
gene.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the hypermobile type, sometimes people get misdiagnosed due to the fact
Mm-hmm.
that there's not a blood test to prove that genetic of that.
Right.
Like, because I think there's EDS has 13 subtypes.
Mm-hmm.
Hypermobile type, they can't locate the gene. They have like a hard time finding what gene that is, so they rely on the Baton scale
Yep.
to diagnose it. So I just remember telling the lady, like, I think that I have blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I just remember her looking at me after the test was concluded and she was like, and I was just like, what? Like, she was just looking at me blank stare. And she was like, I'm not legally allowed to say this, but I will legally allow you to look at what I just wrote. And I looked and it said diagnosis gastroparesis or a blockage because, they can't definitive do that.
Mm.
Um, and then I had an endoscopy and then concluded, which I have a repeat
Mm.
one in June. I don't want to, but Stanford's like, come on down. Let's do it again. I'm like,
Mm.
whatever. So I was actively losing weight and I got diagnosed in November with gastroparesis. So basically 3 diagnoses in a year because POTS was in December, then January, and then November.
Wow.
So that was just like within a 12-month span, I guess you can say 3 major life altering diagnoses. And a lot of these like diagnoses are low spectrum, but a lot of them progress if you have EDS.
Yeah.
Um, so my doctor at the time, just based off weight loss and a bunch of other things, was like, we should do TPN. And I, like, at first I was just kind of like, okay. And then I didn't want to. And I kind of just like had to like fight it, and I kept avoiding it and kept avoiding it. And he was like, I really think we should. And that was just like a scary thing in general. And then my gross strong, started to get infected through mast cell activation syndrome again. I will just show a photo. This one isn't as graphic, but it was just like, it was all over my chest. It was just so uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
it sucked. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like your groshong. We're gonna, get this changed through, to a Broviac catheter, and, then you're gonna get put on TPN. And then that was in the beginning of January of this year. And I ended up seeing a gastroenterologist local to where I live, instead of relying on Stanford. And he was like, I don't think you're adequately ready for TPN. I think that there is other special motility drugs that we can get from Canada
Mm-hmm.
that would be able to help you eat and, prevent and try to help your motility, to help you gain some weight to avoid it. And luckily that med worked with a lot of
Yeah.
protein shakes and a lot of pushing. So I was able to gain an adequate weight to avoid TPN. But I was getting pretty low, where he was even like, if you lose any more, I'm gonna have to like side with him. And now, unfortunately, my insurance will no longer cover this drug.
Mm.
And that's kind of like where I'm at now. Um, and now I'm officially getting a custom wheelchair, and I'm getting forearm crutches. So excited.
Yeah.
But I mean, now it's just like this. I haven't had this motility drug in 2 weeks,
Mm.
and it just sucks. And like, I couldn't even like wean off of it. It was not like, I just went to go refill it, and they were like, because I was out, and they were like, nope, it's not covered by insurance anymore. Don't know what to tell you. I called them. They're like, it's just too expensive, and we can't pay it. And I said, well, can
Mm.
I get my doctor to write something saying that I need this? And they were like, nope, sorry.
Mm.
So I no longer qualify for the drug. They said it was based off of a doctor's notes that I was gaining weight and that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
need it anymore. So they called it an experimental drug.
Well, the thing is, like, if anything, it to me, it's proving that you need it. But I've had similar stories of medications all of a sudden not being covered by insurance and having to kind of work the system a little bit to try to find a way, but that takes time, and not
Yes.
everyone has that time. So, or the doctor doesn't have the ability, or whatever the situation is.
Currently, my doctor is trying to fight it, but it's just not happening, and I would have to pay $1,000 a month copay to continue to receive this drug.
Yeah, some of these medications just are crazy expensive. And it's
Yes.
even with insurance covering it, some of my medications are like still very, very, very expensive. So I don't know. I think that's something like in the chronic illness, like whatever you want to call it, disabled community, we don't really always talk about like what to do when you're in those situations. But I would definitely say to call your insurance company and look into it, because I was able to get a couple things approved by insurance just with fighting for it, but sometimes it's just not an option. I'm sorry if that's the case, because it's
I've been
beyond
trying to get
frustrating.
back on it for a month, and it's seeming like it's just not going to happen. And I can already tell a difference within my GI tract and
Mm-hmm.
how my body is now looking yet again of weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sucks. It's like, how am I supposed to avoid TPN or a potential feeding tube? Which my doctor emailed me the other day, and he was like, well, if this drug isn't working, then we're going to have to talk about a GJ tube or NJ or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then he was even like, well, the fact that you have gastroparesis, so I mean, we could just do the surgical tube. And I was like, I don't even want to think
Mm,
about that. Like, I don't even,
no.
like, there's nothing wrong with feeding tubes, like, whatsoever. They're medical devices. They're there for a reason.
Hmm.
Like, they help you every single day, but it's just like, I
Yeah.
don't know how you felt I don't know how you felt exactly when you got your surgical tube, but like, through me, I would feel like I failed myself.
Yeah. I think I was
And I
just
don't,
needing it and I was so desperate for me, but you're in a completely different stage and like place in your life. So I think my experience was definitely different, but it did feel like I failed myself because I was being told to try this protein powder, try this one, try this food, try that food, try this diet, and it just wasn't the case. It didn't help.
yeah, and it was also frustrating for me too because when he was initially like, we're gonna try TP, and I was like, can we try and not I can't I'm just gonna call them nostril feeding tubes because I don't know like how you like else to refer to them. Maybe I'm just
Yeah.
not educated enough, but um it's just kind of like he was like, no, I don't think that's gonna work for you just because of the severity of the gastroparesis. He basically told me that it's basically 50% partial paralysis
Mm,
based off of their findings. I mean, I don't know how to read the tests very well, but
mm,
that's what he said. So that just kind of like sucks. He's like, I don't think a feeding tube's going to do anything for you at that time. And now I
mm.
guess he's like changing his story a little bit, but
Yeah.
but he's still such a
Well,
great doctor,
hopefully.
and like anything that I ask him
Mm,
to do generally, he'll do it.
yeah, and that's good to have because it's hard to find good doctors like you experience. I experienced similar things like finding a doctor that is gonna listen to you and actually work alongside you is like the big thing is like, no, we're a team, not I'm your doctor, do that, do this, do that test. It's like, no, we're working together and this is how we're going to improve your quality of life versus some doctors, they just demand all these things and order all these tests and medications and it's not helpful.
Him and I are definitely a team, and I'm very blessed to have him. It was such a coincidence. Like, I almost said no to that appointment, and I don't even know where I
Mm,
would be now if I didn't have this doctor. And
mm,
I've talked about him, like, if you follow me personally, like, I go live a lot on social media between TikTok and Instagram, and I'm very active on my socials. And a lot of people, I've talked about him. I've never name dropped him, obviously, for safety reasons and because I don't want him to be bombarded. He's a very busy man. But people have privately reached out to me asking for his name because they need a doctor like him, and that's just so sad to me. Like, I know, that like that sucks and it's probably so rude, but I will never give out his name because one,
mm,
like, I know, like, a quick Google search, like, obviously if you really wanted to find him you could probably find him, because he's a
mm,
doctor, his information's public, his degree and stuff is public, but like, he's my doctor, and like, I just don't feel like he owes everyone in the world, that has chronic illness. Like, I feel like, you know, it might even suck because like doctor shopping, but if you really look to try to find a doctor, that's either experienced in your disabilities or knows a lot about, certain things, and you'll be able to find an adequate doctor. And he actually specializes, one of his like side specialties that he's going back to school for is chronic illness.
okay, so is that your, for the most part, like, does that get us back to today's timing with everything that we just talked about?
Pretty much, that's like the entire timeline. I guess like the only really update is now is like losing my motility drug, most likely. Getting a custom wheelchair in the process. That was frustrating within itself to even start that process because the place in town that I wanted it to be sent to apparently doesn't take my primary insurance, but they'll take my secondary. So
Mm,
therefore, they won't take it. So then he also forgot to send the order, which prolonged it about 4 weeks. But now everything's like good to go. But hopefully, things will slowly but surely eventually progress in a good way and nothing will get worse. And hopefully there'll be no need for TPN or a surgical tube.
Yeah. I hope so too. I hope that you're like, I know it sucks to collect, almost feels like collect these diagnoses,
Yeah.
But now that you have them, that means you have a better chance to getting treatment that works for you. And sometimes getting the diagnosis is a battle in itself, but I'm glad you're at this place now where at least you have answers. And I hope treatment. But I do have one question for you because you pretty much answered all my other questions along the story. But if you could tell yourself before getting quote unquote sick, and if you could like go back and tell that younger self something, what would you tell younger Jordyn? I mean, even as a little girl, or you could say around like teenage years or before you get sick. Like, what would you tell your younger self?
That is a very good question, and maybe you can relate to this one too. I don't want to make this podcast longer than it already is, but that I wasn't all in my head and that it was all real.
Yeah.
And to not listen to what other people have to say or family members or what their opinions was because they weren't experiencing it and it wasn't normal.
Yeah.
And that might sound sad or morbid, but in reality, that's the fucking facts. Like, sorry, but like, people, like family members, just they'll gaslight you into thinking that you're fine, or doctors will, when in reality you're really not. And excuse the language, but it wasn't all right. And now obviously I know there's nothing you can do to change back time, but if you are feeling any of these symptoms or anything like that, definitely advocate for yourself and push.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be sick, or at least be sick and have some form of treatment to help you.
Yeah. And I think we should do a whole episode on how to advocate for ourselves best and talk about like our experiences with being gaslit either by like family members or by doctors even. I think that's a whole episode in itself, is talking about like medically being like the medical gaslighting that both of us have been through. It's wild. I'm sure. Sorry, my blood sugar's dropping. Time for us to go. But yeah, we need to do some episodes on that. But
and it's EDS Awareness Month, so stay tuned.
True. Yeah, we definitely need to talk about that. And I mean, it is EDS, so it's important that we, I don't know, share more about it and
definitely spread awareness to where it's, because a lot of people, like, I literally was just on TikTok and a doctor had posted most like easily gaslit, missed or like ignored diagnosis was chronic pain, chronic migraines, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and Lyme disease.
Wow.
And POTS was on that list. Those are like there's like 5 most common.
That's crazy. All right, so this is it. We're gonna go. Thank you so much for listening. If you've gotten to this point, thank you for listening to our first episode. The next one is going to be vice versa. So I'm going to be the one telling my story. Jordyn's going to be leading it. But we just want to say thank you so much for listening. Everything, our links are linked below. And all you got to do is click. And we hope to keep you guys updated. So thank you for listening to this whole first episode of the very first Diaries Podcast.
Don't forget, if you want to follow us on Instagram, you guys can directly message us through Instagram, and you can ask us questions or even suggestions for podcasts, because we're always looking for suggestions and we definitely want to hear from you guys. And please don't forget, use it as a tool.
Yeah, for sure. I think that would be really helpful, is to even just common questions or future podcast ideas would be appreciated. So thank you. Are we
All right,
good?
bye guys.
Bye.